It has happened again. That quiet, sinking realization. The kind that doesn't scream, it settles. You stood there, nodding politely, agreeing with someone you don't even respect, smiling when every instinct inside you wanted to say one simple word. No. You explained yourself, your logic, your intentions, your character, to someone who never earned the right to question you. And now you're alone, sitting in that strange silence where the world keeps moving, but something inside you has paused. There's a weight in your chest. Not the weight of hard work. Not the weight of responsibility. The hollow weight of self-betrayal. You look in the mirror, and you don't see a man in control. You see fragments, compromises, versions of yourself that existed only to make others comfortable. And the worst part? You know you're capable of more. You can feel it. That quiet frustration. That suppressed fire. That dangerous clarity you try to ignore. Because deep down, you know this isn't kindness. This is avoidance. And in the silent hierarchy of the real world, avoidance has a cost. You were never meant to be invisible in your own life. Yet somehow, you became a spectator. Watching others dominate spaces you were built to lead. Watching louder people win. Not because they're smarter, but because they're certain. Here is the uncomfortable truth most people never say out loud. Your exhaustion isn't coming from doing too much. It's coming from holding yourself back. From constantly shrinking. Editing yourself. Diluting your instincts to fit into rooms that were never designed for strength. You were not born neutral. No human was. For thousands of years, survival belonged to those who could read power, navigate hierarchy, and stand firm under pressure. Strength was not cruelty. Decisiveness was not evil. And boundaries were not arrogance. But somewhere along the way, modern conditioning rewrote the script. You were taught that being agreeable makes you good. That being quiet makes you wise. That sacrificing yourself makes you noble. So you learn to soften your edges. To second-guess your instincts. To apologize for taking up space. And slowly, without even noticing, you abandoned authority over your own life. Not through failure, but through overcompliance. Most people never recover from this. They spend decades living on emotional autopilot. Reacting, adapting, minimizing themselves to avoid friction. But there is a moment, rare but real, when something inside you refuses to stay asleep. A moment when the pattern becomes obvious. When you realize you were never weak. You were untrained. No one taught you how to carry presence, how to hold silence, how to walk into a room without unconsciously asking for permission. Because real power is rarely loud. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase validation. And it certainly doesn't explain itself to everyone in the room. It observes. It chooses. It moves with intention. And most importantly, it knows when to remain silent. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of strength. The average person talks to relieve tension, to fill gaps, to prove they belong. But composed individuals understand something deeper. Whoever controls the emotional tempo controls the interaction. The next time someone challenges you, resist the reflex to respond instantly. Pause, not out of fear, but out of discipline. Let the moment breathe. You'll notice something fascinating. People begin revealing themselves when you stop rushing to explain yours. Because silence creates reflection. And most people are deeply uncomfortable with reflection. Another shift begins when you stop being endlessly available. We live in an era of constant access. Messages, notifications, expectations. And somewhere in that noise, many people accidentally devalue themselves by being present everywhere, all the time. But attention is a form of currency. And like any currency, its value rises with intentional use. This doesn't mean becoming cold. It means becoming deliberate. Not every call needs instant access. Not every message requires urgency. Not every demand deserves your energy. When you become selective, something changes. People begin to notice your presence because it is no longer automatic. And then comes the hardest shift of all, boundaries. Not loud ones. Not dramatic ones. Quiet boundaries. The kind that don't need announcements. You stop over-explaining. Stop over-giving. Stop volunteering yourself for emotional labor that was never yours to carry. And something strange happens. Some people drift away. Not because you changed into someone worse, but because you stopped being endlessly convenient. This is where many people panic. They mistake distance for loss. But distance is often clarity in disguise. It reveals who valued you and who relied on you. And clarity, although uncomfortable, is one of the purest forms of freedom. Because once you see dynamics clearly, you stop personalizing everything. You stop assuming every conflict is your fault. Stop believing every misunderstanding requires your apology. You begin to respond instead of react. And that shift alone can change the entire trajectory of a life. But here is the paradox few talk about. Becoming more grounded will not make everyone like you more. In fact, the opposite often happens. When you stop bending, people who benefited from your flexibility will feel resistance. They may call you distant, cold, different, not because you became harsh, but because you became stable. And stability disrupts unhealthy patterns. This is why growth can feel lonely. Not because you're losing connection, but because you're losing misalignment. And in that space, a new identity begins to form. One that doesn't chase approval, doesn't panic in silence, doesn't shrink in strong rooms. A version of you that understands a simple truth. Respect is rarely negotiated through words. It is communicated through presence, through how calmly you hold eye contact, how slowly you respond under pressure, how comfortably you walk away from what diminishes you. This is not about dominating others. It's about no longer abandoning yourself. Because the real transformation is not becoming intimidating. It's becoming internally anchored. A person who cannot be easily rushed, easily guilt, easily manipulated. And once you reach that state, something powerful happens. You stop trying to win every interaction. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop performing strength. Because you finally feel it. Quietly. Consistently. Unshakably. And that is the moment everything changes. Not loudly. Not dramatically. But permanently. Most people will sense this shift, but won't understand it. They'll just know something is different. And they'll be right. Because you are no longer operating from fear of rejection. You are operating from alignment. And alignment is rare. It cannot be faked. It cannot be borrowed. And it cannot be taken from you once built. But here is the truth most will ignore. Reaching this level requires honesty. Brutal honesty. The willingness to admit where you've been passive. Where you've betrayed your instincts. Where you've chosen comfort over self-respect. Not to shame yourself, but to reclaim authorship. Because the moment you take responsibility for your patterns, you regain power over your future. And from that point forward, every small decision becomes a declaration. Every boundary reinforces identity. Every moment of composure builds authority. Until one day, you no longer recognize the version of yourself that once begged for approval. Not because you became someone else, but because you finally stopped abandoning who you were meant to become. This path is not loud, and it is not crowded. Most people will continue choosing familiarity over growth, comfort over clarity, approval over alignment. But a small number will feel something shift while listening to this. A quiet recognition. Not excitement. Not hype. Recognition. If that feeling is there, pay attention to it. Because moments like that are rare. And they usually mark the beginning of something irreversible. From this point forward, you have a choice. Return to the old patterns, or begin walking differently. Slower. Calmer. More certain. Not to prove anything to the world, but to finally stop proving yourself wrong. And once that shift begins, life doesn't instantly become easier, but it becomes real. And real is where power lives. If you found this video insightful, make sure to like it. For more powerful and thought-provoking content like this, subscribe to our channel and join our journey into the depths of the human mind.